Welcome to The Truth. I'm John Gordon. We're coming to you today from Dallas, Texas, commemorating the 62nd anniversary of John Fitzgerald Kennedy's assassination, just 3 miles from where we're sitting right now. We're here to attend the Dallas Historical Society's symposium, 3 days devoted to scholars, authors, and researchers into JFK's assassination and all the aftermath that flowed from it. So this is a wonderful opportunity to learn and to meet some very special people like the lady sitting next to me now, Jess Connell. She is a YouTuber. She has had over 500,000 hours of viewers watch her channel. And Jess, it's just a pleasure to meet you. You are one of my favorite YouTubers, and I don't say that lightly because I spend an unhealthy amount of time on YouTube, but you're one of my favorites because, as I've said to you directly, you just come across as so genuine and authentic, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your show.
Absolutely. So what got you going down this path? I was home from school, and I watched the announcement the president was dead, sitting in front of my family television with my mom at 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. I was home with the flu. So I got hooked very early. I don't know that I would call it an obsession, but it has certainly been a subject of great interest and frustration to me. How about yourself? What got you hooked?
I mean, I grew up in the Dallas area, so that was a big part of it. I think it's just part of the lore around here. One of the moments where I remember it really turned on for me, I think our oldest child was in a stroller. So that would put it at 22 years ago. But we went down to Dealey Plaza, and my husband and his best friend were going to go in and do the 6th floor museum tour. And they had a baby. And so I said, well, y'all just go, because they were in from out of town. I said, y'all just go. I'll sit out here in the plaza and push the babies around. And I did that, and I ended up bumping into Robert Groden way back then, and I didn't know who he was. Just serendipitously. He had a table there. So one of the things that he did after the JFK movie came out was he sat in the plaza for like 30 years and just told people the truth.
You know, I think I may have met him now that you say that, because I went to Dealey and I talked to a lot of those people that had for decades stayed there and educated people.
And so that was one of the first moments that kind of clicked it on for me, where I was like, okay, there's something to this. And I got, back then, it was the start of the internet, but it wasn't very powerful. But there was a CD-ROM that I took home, and I started playing. It showed the different photos and the different angles. And I just remember really looking at that and thinking, for sure, it's not what we've been told. I knew that, but I thought, maybe Lee did it. I don't know, but that's where I was, from 20 years ago. Very fascinated, but I was a young mom and didn't have a lot of time to dig into it. The youngest is 7 now, so now I get to dig into it.
Right. I think that describes the condition of a lot of people. They have a doubt in their mind, but we all want to believe our federal government.
Yes.
And there is such an attachment to what our government tells people that it's very hard to dispel them of the narrative. Now, for our listeners and viewers, if you haven't watched Jess's YouTube channel, she does something that is really special to me. My favorite part of being in grammar school was after lunch, we'd come back into the classroom and our teacher would read to us for 30 minutes. And it was my favorite part of the day. Jess reads books on the Kennedy assassination and about prominent figures in those days, those very dark days of our country's history. You have a very unique way of presenting information by reading these books. How many? I read that there are over 4,000 books that have been written about JFK and the assassination. How many of those do you possess?
That's a good question. At this point, I would guess I'm well over 100, maybe closer to 200 at this point. But still growing for sure. People keep sending me books. I actually had someone donate this year the entire 26 volumes of the Warren Commission. So,
I will.
so that's part of my collection. And then I've got a lot of the great books. But I'm eager to keep getting more. But yeah, and I think we've read over 60 selections from over 60 books on the channel.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because I've watched a lot of the readings, and you've now kind of morphed a little bit in that you're interviewing people that either have particular historical knowledge, or in the case of, is it Mary Mormon, that you actually went to her house?
I did.
And I felt like I was there with you.
I'm so glad.
Sitting at her kitchen table. Yeah. And I think you even had lunch with her.
I did, yeah. So it was her 93rd birthday.
So tell us about Mary Mormon and why she's significant.
Yeah, so Mary Ann Mormon, she, most people know the woman in the red dress, which is Jean Hill. Mary Ann Mormon was standing right next to her. She's wearing a black coat. She's in the little grassy triangle that's across from the grassy knoll. And she took what is the most famous photo of the assassination. It was taken right at the time of, right the split second before the fatal headshot. And it was put in newspapers that went around the world. So it was kind of the publicized photo of that day. And it's actually people will ask, why is it so fuzzy? It's a very fuzzy photo, but it was a like 2 by 2.25 Polaroid. I mean, really a rather small, so what we get from it, we get the whole grassy knoll behind. But yeah, so she took the most famous photo of the day, and she's now 93, and she's still wonderful, very clear-minded, and was willing to visit with us that day. So it was such a gift to get to.
Well, I was going to say, what a special treat, because that is history. Was there anything in the photo that was revealing or that showed evidence that people are not aware of or may have only heard through innuendo?
So there's 2 different places in that photo where people perceive that there might be grassy knoll shooters. But again, we're talking about a photo that's this big. And then when you're looking at the grassy knoll, you're looking at these tiny little grade sections. But there does appear to be, to my eye, there's one spot that I think does show a head. It's not, it's not clear enough to make out a face, but it does look like there is the fence and there's the bottom of the tree. And then there's a section where there's white from the light behind, and then a shape that looks like a head. And it is at the exact place where the HSCA dictabelt recordings, the audio recordings, those audio recordings identified a spot that was 8 feet back from the corner of that picket fence. That was where one of the shots came from, and it was that fourth. It would be the fatal headshot, and that's what the viewers also like. Bill and Gail Newman, and then I just read something that'll come out on my channel tomorrow. One of the women, and Mary Woodward, I think is her name, but she was a Dallas Morning News staff writer. She was there with 3 of her girlfriends, and they were there on the grassy knoll. And she says, "I heard a loud crack from back and to my right," which is exactly the place that it's talking about. It's what the HSCA audio says. It's what Bill Newman says. And I think that's what we're seeing in Marianne's photograph. So that's the one that's the most clear to me.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I'm not mistaken. I know I heard this individual say, and he had been in the armed services. I'm not sure which branch, but he was on the grassy knoll. And if I'm not badly mistaken, he said he hit the dirt because he heard a bullet screeching past his head.
I think his name is Arnold Rowland.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, and that's right. You're saying exactly what his testimony is.
Well, is he still around?
I don't know. I won't speak about. I'm not sure, but there are a few who are at this point. I mean, we were just talking about we lost Ruth Payne this year, and like you, I had held out hope that would she do us all a favor and really tell the truth? Because she knew, I think, everything. She got on that phone call the day of the assassination before, I think it was before 2:00. She and Michael have a phone call, and she says, "We know it's not Lee, and we both know who is responsible. We know Lee is not responsible for this, and we both know who is responsible." So I think Ruth and Michael. Now, her explanation
is that her husband, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay.
And their phone was tapped because, reportedly, because Lee and Marina had, been in and out of their home. So the FBI was wiretapping. But we have the actual text of that conversation. Her explanation of it is, we thought we knew who was responsible, but it turns out he was. I just think that's not credible. I think they knew who was responsible. I think she played her part all these years and sadly took her secrets to the grave, unless there's some sort of revelation that comes out. Maybe she left a diary to be released in 10 years. I mean, who knows, those sorts of things. But we lost her this year.
Well, you and a lot of historians believe that she did have the key. I'm going to LA after this conference to be with my new grandson and our granddaughter and my son and his wife for Thanksgiving. And I really contemplated going to Ruth Payne's house, ringing the doorbell and getting her to tell the truth.
Yeah.
But I guess we missed that opportunity.
We did.
But are there other people living that you're aware of that might hold the key to this that have not come forward?
Well, Marina is still alive. And she, I think, especially with Ruth not being around, I think she's a person who, from everything I can tell, she was not only vulnerable as a postpartum mother. I mean, she had had a baby weeks before the assassination, so she was vulnerable. But it was her second language. So she's operating in a very complex situation, way out of her depth, language-wise, like any of us would be if we went to another country. She was completely vulnerable to whatever threats and manipulation the government put on her. And she had been manipulated by Ruth Payne and Priscilla Johnson. Macmillan later came along and manipulated her and got her to write this book, Marina and Lee, bad-mouthing Lee. And it now turns out Priscilla Johnson, she was CIA. Macmillan, she's CIA affiliated. So when I look at Marina, I see a woman who was very co-opted by other people and manipulated and pressured. And so I think she perhaps is the final key player that could blow things wide open if she's willing to. But I mean, she also has 2 daughters and a son that probably she has to think about, just like all the other,
right,
eyewitnesses we were talking about earlier that dealt with their own threats and manipulation.
So where is Marina today?
Well, she was in Rockwall, Texas for ages and ages. And I've heard recently that she's moved away from there, but I don't know her location. Still in the Dallas area, though.
So is she remarried?
She remarried?
So these children are by her second husband, or not by Lee?
So June and Rachel June was, I think, 2.5 or 3 at the time of the assassination, and then Rachel was a few weeks old at the time of the assassination. So she was a mother of 2 very small children at the time.
And these were Lee Oswald?
Those were Lee's. They are Lee's daughters. But then she remarried a man named Ken Porter, and they had a son, and I don't know his name. But so she has 3 children. And I believe the last I heard, at least a couple of her children and her have continued to stay in the Dallas area. So
of all the books that you've read, is there one that stands out? If someone wants to go and really get themselves educated on what happened on November 22nd, 1963, is there a book? Obviously, Mark Lane's Rush to Judgment was sort of cracked the ice, I think.
Sure.
And really took a subject that was forbidden and allowed journalists and people to write about it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, my favorite book on the topic, because I think, well, I know Robert Groden personally, so that's part of it. But his book, it's a photography book, and it includes over 1,000 photographs of the assassination. It's called JFK Absolute Proof. And he is the holder. He's not only the person who released the Zapruder film, but he's the holder of the largest JFK assassination photographs and videography in the world. He's collected amazing photography, and I think that's the most comprehensive book on the topic because the visuals make such a difference. It helps you understand what happened. It helps you see from a variety of angles, things that you can't see with words. But
so how did Robert Groden come into possession of the Zapruder film?
Yeah, I did an interview about this on my channel. So for anybody who's interested, you can see that long form interview. But the gist is he went to work for a photographic firm in New York City, in Manhattan, that did, they were the only company that could take certain kinds of film and convert it into other formats of film. And they did it for the Hollywood, for the movie industry all the time. And they were the only ones that could do it reliably. And they actually invented a way of blowing it up because it's on 8mm film, which is like tiny. I mean, the strip is just completely tiny. It's a thin little strip of film. And they normally you'd have to blow it up twice, as he's explained it to me. And so you would lose detail in each blow up. They took out the bellows and they blew it up to 35mm so that it could be studied and reproduced for Life magazine. In that process, the owner of the company made himself a personal copy. And later he gifted a copy to Robert. And so Robert was in possession from 1969 until 1975. And he nervously began studying it, and he developed this program, this format called Grodenscoping, it's been called, where he centered the camera on JFK's ear. Because when you're watching the Zapruder film, the original, JFK's head bounces around in the frame because Abraham Zapruder was unstable.
Right.
And because he's reacting to the shots coming from behind him.
Yes.
And so every now and then you get this jolt. And so JFK's head bounces. Well, Roberts essentially did stabilization techniques before there was such a thing. And he did it by individually shooting each frame, and they blew it up. And so he was the one who had that. And then he started showing it to an occasional researcher. But they finally, Dick Gregory, the comedian, was the one who convinced him that, look, we've got to do more with this. And they went on to the Geraldo Rivera show called Good Night America. And they showed it in, I believe, March of 1975, 12 years after the assassination. And the very next day, he got a call from Congressman Downing, and the HSCA was born from that. They immediately said, because it was so clear prior to that, we had been told by Dan Rather that the head moved violently forward. We had been told by the Warren Commission because they misprinted 2 frames of the headshot to show violent forward motion. So the American people...
Intentional manipulation.
Yes, the American people had been incredibly given enough evidence to believe that that's what had happened so that they could shush up their concerns. Right. But the minute they see it on Geraldo's show, there's just, the whole audience is stunned. The television audience was stunned, and it changed history because that's when HSCA was born. So it's a big deal. It's, that's why you'll hear a lot of people at conferences like this say we owe a great deal to Robert Groden. It's because he is the reason why those congressional investigations were reopened rather than us just being left with the Warren Commission.
And to this day, I am astounded by the fact that many outlets in the mainstream media will print that Oswald acted alone as the lone gunman. Yet, a bipartisan committee of the United States House of Representatives in 1978 concluded with 99% certainty that there was a conspiracy. So why are they still touting the same worn-out, fictitious line? I don't get it, but I do.
We do, yeah.
And I think that's why the American people are not willing to let this go.
It's the fracture in our national story that we all remember. We know it's there, and even young people in their 20s. One of my sons, he's in his 20s, he said, I think it goes back to 63. Just yesterday, actually, I sent myself this as a quote. I'll read it. Brett Weinstein on a podcast yesterday, it came out. He was talking about government corruption, and he said, does it go back to 1963? Was there a coup in 1963, and the people who took power have never relinquished it? Like, we all feel it. That's just on a random podcast. They weren't even talking about JFK, but we feel, does this go back to 1963? Is that what started all of this? That it's this big behemoth of some sort of deep power that's held onto it. And we don't exactly know who, maybe, and we don't exactly know what they did in 1963 or what means they used to get there, but we recognize it goes back to that, and that's when the fracture began, or at least that was the most evident appearance of the fracture.
I say it's the day America lost its innocence.
That's right.
I know I certainly lost my innocence as a 10-year-old. My mother said, John, the president has been shot. And I remember that moment as if it were yesterday. And I remember my disbelief, the stages of grief. My first reaction was denial because I didn't know what it meant for the president to be shot as a 10-year-old. That was so foreign to me. And it was before we saw shoot 'em up television and crime and,
Right.
real crime stories on TV. So I grew up with Lassie and Ed Sullivan and the wonderful world of Disney. My, how things have changed.
And right in the middle of that trauma that everyone was having, because I get comments every day from people who are saying things like that of my mom cried for 3 days straight. But in the middle of all of that was the very first televised live murder of Lee Oswald. And people didn't know how to feel. I think RFK Jr. has said he asked his dad, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? He said, I didn't fully understand it. I think he was 11. He said, I didn't know how to feel about it. Are we glad he was killed or not? And that's a lot.
Now, I'm not relating to that. Why would he wonder if it was a good thing?
Well, because his uncle had been shot. And so he thought, is it good that the bad guy lost his life?
Oh, that Lee Harvey Oswald.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh,
yes.
I see.
After hearing that Lee Harvey Oswald had lost his life,
they silenced the best witness.
Is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? But he didn't understand as an 11-year-old. He thought,
sure,
I feel like this could be good because it's the bad guy, but for some reason nobody seemed glad around me. And it's because you recognize this isn't how we do government. This isn't who Americans are supposed to be. We aren't people who, have government changed by bullets and then silence the story. That's not what we do.
I just think about all the people who lost their lives that day or as a result of that day. Yeah. And Dorothy Kilgallen, who I used to watch as a kid on What's My Line, she came to Dallas and interviewed Jack Ruby in prison. She got back to New York and she spoke to her best friend, I think her name was Mary Smith, and said, read the paper this week. I'm going to blow the lid off the JFK's assassination. And she didn't wake up the next morning. And I think she's just one of maybe as many as 100 people.
That's right.
Who have lost their lives mysteriously and through accidents that don't add up.
That's a great book recommendation also is Richard Belzer's book, Hit List. He takes the top 50 deaths that are JFK related and goes one by one through the case and tells the facts and makes a determination about whether or not it's suspicious circumstances. It's an excellent book.
Well, one of the things about JFK's assassination that I wrestled with for a long time is that I could not reconcile the death of J.D. Tippit. To me, that was convincing proof that Oswald killed Kennedy. But then I watched you, and you went to the place where Tippit was killed, along with your now friend, Mike Dowfett. And you completely changed my perspective. I'll tell our listeners what you discovered.
Yeah, well, Matt is a really deep expert in J.D. Tippit, and I was really thankful he took me on what he calls his Tippit tour, but it started on the steps of the Texas School Book Depository, and we followed the steps of Lee Oswald exactly according to what was observed and measured our times against the Warren Commission times and found, first of all, that even if you just do that, Lee Harvey Oswald is exonerated just on the time trials. So that's really important because there are eyewitnesses who saw him at particular times that timestamp, and then there's a distance that he has to travel to get to J.D. Tippit. So that's number one. But then he also walked systematically through all of the eyewitnesses and brought amazing research. I mean, he is so well researched about the case and showed from each perspective which witnesses are valuable, what they observed, what they said, what they could have seen. It was just very fascinating, very interesting. He even has the original police recordings that were wonderful to get to listen to. And so, yeah.
Okay, so you cleared up my misconception about that. And the inference is that there was a body double. Right? That people thought they were seeing Oswald shoot Tippit, but it was really his double?
Some people think that's what happened. But like one witness, Aquila Clemens, she saw two men. One of them was tall and thin, So taller than Lee Oswald is how she describes him, and thin. And then the other one she says was short and kind of chunky and had black curly hair. Neither of those descriptions fit Lee Oswald. And when you look into the witnesses, it doesn't seem, one of them says he's a Hispanic man named Domingo Benavides, and he says that the person who did it, that their hair was black and that their skin was darker than mine. And so that's not Lee Oswald. So I don't even think you have to have a Lee Oswald double. I mean, it sounds, the black wavy hair and short and chunky sounds
Yeah, that's
more
not
like
a double,
Ruby
for sure.
than Lee Oswald.
Well, what about the guy that was supposedly also in the theater that looked like Oswald in
Now,
the
that's
balcony?
a double. That's
So I always sort of concluded that maybe that was the person who shot Tippett. And we got the guy in the shoe store who saw someone running into the theater.
So I do think it's possible that the tall white man, I don't think the person being described with ruddy complexion and black wavy hair can be who's being mistaken for Lee, but possibly the white thin man. Maybe he ran off in that direction and went to the theater, but he wasn't the one that did the shooting.
Okay, well, you and Mr. Douthat did have unquestionably convinced me that Oswald was not the shooter of Tippett. But then I'm left with this other question in my mind. Did Oswald shoot at General Edwin Walker a year or 6 months earlier?
That's one of the interesting things that I need to look into more, but I'll tell you what I know that already makes me dubious about it. There's a couple of things. One is I've seen people suggest that perhaps if Oswald was intel or an FBI, informant type person, that maybe he was a part of a mission to go and make it look like there had been an assassination attempt, which is why he missed wildly and hit the window frame instead of getting anywhere close to General Walker. So that's one, is that maybe there was an intentional miss.
So at least we know he wasn't a good shot.
Right.
If he couldn't make that shot with General Walker sitting in his easy chair at home, then how could he shoot Kennedy from 200 yards away in a moving car?
That's never been a good case for Lee being the one to do the JFK assassination. But the other thing is that General Walker, if you look at what he believed about his shooting, apparently the ballistics, they swapped the ballistics after 11/22/63.
Really?
And so the bullet that he held in his hand, General Walker said he knew Lee didn't do it, because the bullet he held in his hand was, I want to say, I'm not a ballistics expert, I want to say it was like a lot of copper, and so it was super mangled, whereas Lee's rifle has a completely different bullet pattern that's very clear. And so they swapped out the ballistics, and General Walker never believed that Lee was the one who took the shot. I mean, there's also things like the eyewitnesses said there were 2 men at the General Walker shooting. So there's things like that that just make me think if Lee was a part of it, it was as some sort of intel op to try to make General Walker to be like an extremist attempt. Right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, somebody capable of murder.
Right.
Where otherwise the story could fall apart. Well, why do you think that unraveling this mystery is so important today?
Well, I mean, I fundamentally, I'm a Christian. I am always for the truth, and I think the truth wins. I think we're all better off when we live in the truth. I think telling the truth is better for our souls. I think that's true on an individual level, and I think it's true on a national level. I think when we live and walk in the truth, we have peace with ourselves. We know we're not storing up hidden things, and I think our nation has a bunch of hidden things that are, if not as a result of this, they're tangential. Because of this, there's been more that's been hidden. Project Mockingbird has made it to where things have been hidden repeatedly, and we don't even know all the things. And, President Trump, when he talked about doing the documents release, he used this interesting phrase. He said, I think it's time for a national cleansing. Do you remember that?
No, but I did not know that. I think he must be watching the truth.
I wonder if it was fall of 2024 when he made that statement, but he said, it's time for a national cleansing. He said, I think it's time.
Well, you can ask our listeners. I have made that statement for the last 3 years. And that's why I think that the Kennedy assassination and the truth about it is so vitally important, because I don't think that we will be the greatest country on earth if we continue to live the way that we are living.
That's right.
And there is nothing Christian about it. There's nothing virtuous about it. There's nothing truthful about it. And to me, and our listeners can tell you that virtually a Saturday goes by that I don't bring this up on our program, because my sense is that if we can get an uprising from the American people to demand the truth about Kennedy, then if that is true, then what else must also be true? Like, what happened to Building 7?
Right.
Now, I think that would be a fascinating series for you to launch. Who took a shot at President Trump in Butler, Pennsylvania? I don't
sketchy.
personally believe that it was Thomas Matthew Crooks.
There are so many weird details around that one, and Las Vegas, and Charlie Kirk. And, I mean, you go down the list,
And
it is
Charlie Kirk, who I knew Charlie well.
Did you?
He was probably, next to you, maybe you, the smartest person I've ever met and talked to. And I don't mean that sarcastically at all. I think you're a very intelligent, well-studied person. And I have nothing to gain by complimenting you. I mean it sincerely. But Charlie, I think, and you both are on the same level. Just like I think that James, I'm struggling for his last name, James O'Keefe.
James.
Whew.
Yeah.
James is kind of a friend of mine. We don't know each other well, but we know each other by name and speak cordially. He is brilliant. And so
He does important work.
And Tucker, I think, is brilliant. And I think that the lady podcaster, Megyn Kelly, thank you.
Megyn Kelly.
And Candace Owens. Yeah. I'm thinking that if we were somehow able to all come together and stop maybe working in silos, that we could have maybe a national movement to demand the truth. And that's what I want. Not because of a prurient interest or because I'm some kind of a voyeur. I don't care. Really, I mean, do I care what happened at Epstein Island? I care for the victims, but I also care, maybe even more so, to learn if our government had a role in it.
Right.
Which is my suspicion.
What does it mean for all of us?
And what does it mean for all of us, our children and our grandchildren?
And that's where, we talk about the JFK assassination, but I have thought recently that maybe I want to dig into the RFK, MLK.
Sure.
There's not as much books about them, obviously. There's not 4,000 books written about theirs, but
there's plenty of scholarly works.
Yes, and they are equally significant in terms of they were each leading people in a way that was inspiring and beautiful and bringing about change. And they were gunned down. And sadly, I think the evidence shows that they were all certainly threatened and manipulated by our government. And I think that the truth about their deaths was covered up. But I also wondered, did our government have a hand in them? It's a very terrifying thought. It's something that would shake everything about our foundations. And I think that's why even somebody who's, like Trump purports to be, pursuing the truth, I think it's still a dangerous thing to unleash.
Well, there's another friend of mine, Dr. Alveda King. I'm from Atlanta, and so I've known family members of the King family. I have a charity that does work in a neighborhood adjacent to where Dr. King lived at the time he was assassinated. And so Dr. Alveda King was on The Truth not too many weeks ago, and we talked extensively about Dr. King's assassination. I was not aware, or if I was, I had forgotten, but there was actually a civil trial conducted in Memphis, Tennessee, alleging that James Earl Ray was not the assassin. And a jury of 12 men and women concluded that James Earl Ray was innocent of the crime and that there was a conspiracy and probably involved our own government. So here is another fiber in the mosaic. And I'm like, if President Trump said it, good for him. I have steadfastly maintained we need a cleansing in America, and it starts with all these secrets being revealed. The American people can handle it. We're tough. We're resilient. We've lived through a lot. We can damn sure handle the truth. And I think it's high time that we get it. I think you and I, and then we'll go get these other folks, need to lead the people to demand that our government be forthcoming and tell us the truth on all of these. And I think that the people that did it need to be held accountable, even if it means ripping LBJ and J. Edgar Hoover's names off the buildings that they're memorialized with.
And the highway that wraps around right here.
And the highway that wraps around Dallas. Please tell me that that's not the highway that JFK was transported to Parkland Hospital.
No, it's 635. It's a loop around Dallas that's named the LBJ Freeway.
Well, Jess Connell, it has been such a pleasure and an honor to get to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
And you're so nice to spend the time with us. And I would keep you here longer, but you got to go home and cook. She's got 9 children. And I've met them, and I've met 5 of the 9, and they are wonderful, very well-mannered children. I need to know your secret. You homeschooled them. We can start with that.
We did.
Well, I think that child rearing perhaps is the most noble of all callings. That was the role that my wife assumed without any encouragement from anybody. And we have 3 adult sons now who I'm very proud of and love as much as you can love a human being. So we divided the responsibilities. Helen was in charge of entertainment, and I was in charge of discipline. How convenient. Jess, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on The Truth.
Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it.